Hey everyone, welcome to the CSI Secret Store community call. Today is the April 13th. This call falls under the CNCF Code of Conduct. It will be recorded and published to YouTube. If you haven't already added your name to the attendees list, please go ahead and do so. I can help moderate the call. Does anyone want to volunteer to take notes?
I can take notes.
Thank you very much. Okay. So in terms of agenda items, I think there were few from last time that we couldn't get to. So the milestone one and the splitting secret. So I moved them over. And for the disconnected discussion, we had, I think we spent the last 1 hour in the community call discussing about what we want to do. And then I added that here just so that we can close out on what we want to do in terms of next steps. And then if there are any other questions, then we can talk about that as well. So the first one was the disconnected discussion based on the last community meeting. I think we decided that we will start with a POC because there were a few lingering questions about the cache key. But I think we said we'll start with the POC and then see if we can make a decision after we start the implementation. I just wanted to bring that up here and see if anyone else had any other thoughts or anything else that they wanted to discuss on this one specifically.
I had a quick question about, I guess, is there any dependency or interoperability between both of these proposals? Like, how does the proposal to separate the controller out, how does that impact this offline proposal, or not at all?
It should not impact because I think with this proposal specifically, I think we're talking about supporting disconnected scenarios in the mount path. So basically, this enables caching at the driver level so that when any new pod as part of the deployment, so it scales up, says like, hey, I want to mount the volume with the same secret provider class, then we would look up the cache, and then based on the policy defined by the user, if it's already in the cache, then we would mount that and then the pod would start up. But splitting the controller is specifically only doing sync as Kubernetes secret. So I think for that, in terms of caching, the cache would just be the Kubernetes secret. Like I think we were discussing about should we delete the secret after a defined TTL by the user and all of that. Like there are still questions that we need to answer, but that's the distinction basically.
Gotcha. So is it good to conclude that this proposal is just for the driver piece, right? So in the future, if we were to decouple the two, this would just impact the driver, right?
Right.
Okay.
And if we don't decouple, like, I mean, we want to do that, but if we don't decouple, like this will also benefit sync secrets. Like,
makes sense.
It exists.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks.
But I think in terms of next step, I think Mo, you had volunteered, you want to look at it, but we can pair on this. And then I think the first step would be the POC, and then we can finalize this design doc. And then the step after that would be we take it to Sigoth and see if we have consensus there as well. Okay, if there are no questions on this one, if you all have any comments, like please feel free to add to it. We can also sync up on Slack. Okay. The next item was should we add another planning session for the upcoming milestone? Xander, do you want to just quickly talk about it?
Yeah, that one I think I put down last time to talk about if we wanted to. Sorry, my dog is wanting to be fed. If we wanted to use the time, like maybe at the next meeting, to do like a high level milestone planning, we just kind of did that with Keeper too, like. I don't know, would that be helpful? Do you want to get some milestones added to the repo and such?
Yeah, for sure. I think there are like a couple of items that we are working on. So
Right.
we definitely add a milestone and then also maybe set a deadline on when we want to cut the release. So that we can share that with the users. And I think there are like few of these discussions that we're talking about. So maybe we can add more detail to those as well, and then like add it to our roadmap.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, given that we have the discussion on splitting the controller and stuff too this week, maybe let's set aside the next meeting time to do a milestone planning. Like we can book an ad hoc time too, but I figure everyone probably just wants to use the existing set aside time.
Yeah, that sounds good. Okay.
And maybe sync with Tommy too to make sure he knows when we're planning on doing that, since he probably cares about what we're planning on.
I mean, I would expect we put it in Slack, right? So that anyone can join, right?
Right. No, I was more saying that like if it's a meeting that, like, for example, a bunch of us can't attend or something, it might not be a very good planning meeting.
Make sure he's there, yes.
Okay. The last topic was the one I think that we wanted to discuss. So for the splitting the sync secret controller from the CSI driver, right? And then I think so. This was an old proposal that we talked about during the SIGOT meeting, maybe in 2021. And then the general consensus was, yes, we can do this. And then the idea was to remove the sync controller from the CSI driver. That way we remove the dependency on the pod requiring the mount. And the benefits are we could reuse the existing providers, like the providers don't have to make any changes. The only few changes would be that we don't use Unix domain socket, because this would just be like a single controller that would have all the different providers running as just different containers within a pod. So that's one thing. And then the second thing is we could just use the secret provider class as is, because the providers already understand that, and then the controller could just pass it on to the provider to go and fetch the secrets. The one piece that was being discussed was how would we do auth with it. And one of the ideas that we had then was we could basically try to use the service account with the custom resource, and consider the custom resource as a workload. So we could still use workload identity with different providers, but here, instead of a pod being a workload, the custom resource would just be the workload. So that was the idea I think that we had. And then as we've been discussing more about it now, we've been looking at other options that have been available out there. And the ESO being the popular option that's used with syncing as Kubernetes secret. I think one thing that we came across in their documentation was they also consider custom resource as a workload. And so they use workload identity by binding a service account with the custom resource. And initially they used to have all the permissions assigned to the ESO controller, but now it can be just given to individual custom resources. So they also have that level of granularity. So I think the discussion that we as a community need to have now is if we split the controller, our controller could be very similar to some of the projects that's available out there. The only differentiator now that we can see is reusing the known provider patterns. And then the second one is for our existing customers or users to reuse the secret provider class without having to go and onboard to a new project. So those are the existing benefits that we see. And I think we need to make a decision that given all of this, is this something that we want to split going forward and support as a separate project?
Quick question, Anish. I think you mentioned something about the UDS earlier when you were doing. We would still have the UDS though, right? It's just that instead of the UDS being used inside the kubelet, it would just be inside the container, right?
Yeah,
Like we don't want to make the providers change their interface, right?
yeah,
So
I think we can still use the UDS. Yeah.
yeah, it does require you to have like a megapod or whatever you want to call it, where all the things are shoved into one place.
Yeah, I think in terms of how it's packaged and all of that, maybe this controller project that just needs to package all the pods in all of the containers together. Like today, the driver only has a driver, and providers have their own install steps saying like, hey, you want to do this, like install it through Helm, install the driver separately, and all of that. But yeah, here like it would just be one mega pod, and probably we have to package it in a single place.
Yeah, I mean that one has a little bit of the kingmaker issue that was originally discussed, like when this was first talked about in Sagoth, was because we didn't want to play that role in the community. We wanted to let anyone use whatever they wanted. Maybe this is okay because we're not editing your YAML isn't like a high barrier. Like you could change it to whatever you wanted if that's what you needed.
Right. And then even if we have to do it and if it's there in like this controller repo, like maybe just Helm charts is fine because that way the user can choose which providers they want to install. So like basically we can have if clauses around the containers and then install only the providers that the user wants, not have everything added by default, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I think we would do that. I'm still a little bit hesitant to say that we get to decide what the complete possible set is. That kind of goes against a little bit of the spirit of the project. But you know, maybe we would just say that like people can add their stuff as long as like it's reasonably functional or something.
Right. Yeah, I think so. We have this criteria in the driver today on how they can be a supported provider or be added to our docs, right? So, like, one of that is like functioning E2E test. Like, it doesn't have to be expensive, but at least at the bare minimum, we want to validate that like some of the features that we support works, like the interface works and all of that. So that could be one criteria if they want to be added to this mega pod thing. Like one of the criteria is they have like some basic test that works with their provider.
Mhm.
And I think it is safe to assume that you're gonna support rotation and other stuff as well, right here.
Right.
Oh, one more thing I was thinking, like, should we also consider the scope of injecting as an environment variable in this, or maybe should we keep that separate as more suggested and try to drive it upstream? What do you guys think?
I guess for everyone on the call, the context is we have seen people that use the secret sync feature purely because they want to use environment variables in their containers because that's what their apps need. But that means you expose your vault secrets into the Kubernetes secrets space purely because of like how it's consumed in the pod, and not because you actually needed a Kubernetes secret at all, right? So it's not the ingress use case where you reference a Kubernetes secret or some other place where you have to reference a Kubernetes secret. So that's kind of painful. I don't think we want to encourage that as a sort of like as a weird workaround to the fact that some people don't want to use file-based secrets. They want to use environment variable-based secrets. So if there was something we could do at the driver level to support that, either through changes in Kubernetes upstream or changes in the driver or whatever, that to me sounds like a good like a good thing to invest time in, especially if we plan on removing the secret sync feature, right? So that way the parts that are sort of compatible with like the spirit of the project are retained, and the parts that we consider orthogonal to the project move where they need to go, and then people can kind of use whatever they need.
But does it have to be at the driver, or like just on the controller level would be sufficient.
By controller, you mean the secret sync controller? Well, no, so what I wanted to have, like, certainly if you have the secret sync controller, you don't need anything special to use environment variables. Kubernetes just supports that for you. I more mean that at the driver level, where we're not syncing Kubernetes secrets, we should have a story for consuming the secrets as environment variables instead of files on disk without the Kubernetes secrets indirection, right? Like, if
Right.
you want to,
Sorry.
I think I was done. But yeah.
No, I was saying, sorry, even if it is without relying on the sync secret, like just doing the environment variable, do we need to do it on the driver? It was my question. Like it could just be in the controller, right? Like it doesn't have to be a driver.
I think that would depend how we want to approach it, right? I think if we want to drive it like in KK, then probably the driver might be the right place, I guess. And then if not KK, then maybe we can see with this new controller if we can support it.
I guess I think, Anish, to your question, it might be a third thing, right? It's not necessarily related to the controller or the driver. Like, basically, it would be related to the driver if we came up with a solution that made like conceptual sense to be in the driver. Otherwise, it doesn't necessarily belong in either one of the places, and it's sort of like a separate thing, maybe to help. Like if, for example, if it's like an admission webhook that injects stuff into your pod for you, and sure, it's just a separate thing. Like, it might live in the same repo and it might be in the same Helm chart, but it's not logically the same component. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I think because I was thinking that like the driver is mostly only used for the CSI concepts, right? And then if the environment variable changes actually don't really relate to the CSI spec and all of that, like we don't need to have a daemon set or like a driver pod running on every single node just for syncing as just for the environment variable part. So, but it makes sense.
Rita, what was your question about feature? I didn't get that. You pasted in the
No,
chat.
I was just agreeing. I said it's the other most asked feature.
So the top most
Got
asked feature is Kubernetes secret, and the second most is environment variables. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Like
Yep.
every single time.
People are using
everything now.
Yeah, people are using it wrong. Like they feels like they're abusing
Never say that.
sync
Never say
feature.
that. I mean, it's not natural. It's not the way people are used to. I think that's the problem, right?
And
But
that's
also,
most.
go ahead.
Oh, I was saying that also mostly happens when people are migrating rather than writing new application, because the old way is like consuming through environment variables. So they don't want to make any code changes, basically.
Well, Helm charts, like simple put, Helm chart. This is why they can't use a driver. This is why they want to use environment variable, because they don't want to fork the chart.
Yeah.
So, for the environment variable thing, may I request that we postpone on that and wait for the solid mutating emission controller? Because we might just get it for free. If it
100% sure we would get it for free. I'm not like I don't know what the capabilities of that will be and if they would be robust.
Well, it's essentially like a mutating webhook, but right in process. But if it's easy enough, potentially all we need to do is integrate with like the mutating, like the new kind, right? Then kind of like the validating emission policy. So we will just interface with like a native Kubernetes API. So we'll create those, like the controller might create that, right? As opposed to us writing a mutating webhook. I don't want to work on something that is actually coming in natively. It is my point. If we could wait.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I don't know what the full feature set of the mutating thing is going to be, and I don't exactly know what our thing would do, and thus I'm a little unsure.
Yeah. I mean, we can start thinking about it for sure, but I think the the idea behind that proposal is instead of writing your own webhooks, right, you would write the new native resources.
Yeah, the other very different thought I had was, could we change things in Kubernetes to make it so that the driver can tell us environment variables? Right, so the driver can only give you files today, and maybe it's not even the driver, maybe it's some other component, but like, could it be possible to ask an external entity to set environment variables for you? Because so then it would kind of be like it could be like, instead of secret CSI store, it could be like secrets environment store. Yeah, but I don't know enough about like container runtimes and stuff to know if that's like a reasonable ask.
Yeah, I don't know, especially with like how environment variable, like how you can isolate it, because you don't want to like have to muck with like the node, like exposing it at the node level, I guess. Anyway, off tangent for too much. For this particular proposal though, is it possible to create a proposal specifically for how we're going to separate out the controller? Because this doc, because it's meant for how things work today, I don't think we want to discuss it in this doc, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I can write up a doc on how we want to do it, and then we can discuss using that in the next one. Or I can share it before too, so we can all chat on Slack as well.
But I think the larger question still remains in my head, right? Is like, should we do the split at all? Or should we just remove the secret sync feature and say, please use ESO? And then we'll focus our efforts on the offline support in Secret CSI Store and the environment variable support in Secret CSI Store. If we have both of those things, we can just say that the project is effectively feature complete with, hand waving that more stuff might come along, whatever. But that's like the scope of this project. And if you want Kubernetes secrets, you use ESO.
It's tough. I think like this is maybe just hand wavy and not actually helpful in reaching a decision, but like I get what you're saying. Like it does feel like in a sense we're just duplicating the functionality of an existing project that is now like CNCF incubating and like all of that. And yeah, it's really, I do think it's a compelling argument that like existing users don't want to migrate and want to reuse the existing secret provider class. But effectively we would be duplicating the project just for that purpose. And do we think it's worth it? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, what happened to I thought there was interest to collaborate between CSI and ESO, right?
That conversation is still open, and they wanted to chat at KubeCon next week. So that's still a route we can go. Yeah, I think there's a lot of forms that could take, like some kind of shim to translate between the two configuration objects, or yeah, that door is open still.
Yeah, I think in terms of long term for it, right? Like the conversation that we had with them was suggesting that we could build this translation layer where, like, if a user deploys secret provider class, it would convert to an ESO custom resource, and then they would understand how to do it, right? Like the question there would be, is that something that we want to do long term? Because yes, that helps users migrate eventually to ESO custom resources. But we don't want to keep supporting it, because that means ESO has to, like, if we make any CRD changes and like the spec changes, the schema changes, like ESO has to constantly keep supporting all of these different versions that we produce. Like one thing is that, and if that is the route that we really want to go, and if it's just about helping users migrate, we could just build a tool that will do a one-time operation, right? Like as the authors of the driver and like the ESO, like we know the custom resources, like how they need to translate. So we could just build a simple tool that says like, hey, feed in your secret provider class. It'll convert it to a ESO custom resource, and then you can go and start using it. But the question there would be, is that what users want? Like, do they want something that comes from like the secret store, like the the SIGAuth community, or they want to go and install another project that they want to maintain? Like, I think that's something that we want to understand from our users too before we make that decision.
Yeah, I think the other open question is, even if you do all this, right, you're still asking someone to run a new component. And I think that's like the real hurdle. It's not really the custom resources, because we can help you migrate either one time or with a controller or whatever. But if I ask you to run a brand new thing, configure it, and make sure it's got the same sort of setup and availability as your driver, I don't really know if I've meaningfully helped you with the migration much, right? Because you still have to run the new thing. I don't think we're going to start like including ESO in our Helm charts, right? That seems like excessive, because it's like a completely different project. So yeah, like my gut says that, like, even though this feature, the secret sync feature is the most requested feature, right? It's is and always has been like orthogonal to the project, right? And that's why we're kind of stuck now, is right, like we have it, people are reliant on it, and so now we're trying to figure out if we're supposed to continue investing into it or not. And I mean, I guess you could argue that having multiple solutions in the same space is healthy for the ecosystem. That's not like a bad thing, right? Open source has this all the time.
Rita, to answer your question, like in my experience, like every customer we talk to, there is a very good possibility that they are using SyncSecret.
Yeah, I'm really concerned about like actually deprecating what that looks like. It might be a lot of work and risk for people, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think like also the interesting thing is like, even though we have it coupled now and all of that, or most of our users, if they're using it only for sync secret and not for the mount, like they're still using it. So like they could be using the other projects out there today, right, which solely only do sync secrets, but they're still using the CSI driver. Like we could reach out to them and see like what is the motivation, like the differentiator here, right? It could be like the community or like any other reason, but they're still using it. So, and then they're requesting for us to like separate it out. So if we do separate it out, they want to use that solution.
Is this a issue in the repo for separating it out? Maybe just, if not already, might be good to just open up the issue and then have people thumb up or thumb down.
So we do have one issue from a year or two back. Like that does have a lot of thumbs up, because they were like, yeah, we want to have this as a separate thing.
Okay, interesting.
Maybe we should start pinging that issue again and be like, hey, if you want it as a separate thing, why not just ESO? And then also put that in our Slack channel and restart. Like I guess if it was a couple of years, like thank you, Xander. I guess I would say I would be curious if the people that previously thumbed it up was long enough ago that ESO wasn't mature enough then. Because I think ESO came after Secret CSI Store, right? Or if maybe it didn't, I don't know. But a couple of years go by, right? A lot of things change, right? So like it might have been that there was some good reasons that they didn't want to run ESO, or
I mean, one thing I just want to be careful of, like I think we should say like, hey, there's this ESO project, what do you think? And if you don't want to use it, why not, right? As opposed to, I don't want especially people who's already using this feature, I don't want them to feel like, oh, we're abandoning you and there's this other project that use it, go use it. Like, I definitely don't want people to feel that way. So it's more, the question is more like, I'm curious, have you looked at it? And if so, why does it not fit your scenario, right? Because I think it could be pretty daunting if you are using this feature in production and you'll from the maintainers, you see like, oh, you're telling me to use something else. That's could be very, very nerve-wracking.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think at the sort of like the highest level, I think what we were thinking about is if we did do a deprecation and removal, it would occur across like a major version boundary, and we would retain the old version for some amount of time, maybe longer than we traditionally do, explicitly to give people more time. But again, this assumes that we define a very crisp, like, this is where you are today, and this is where we need you to go. And regardless of if that's the controller or ESO or whatever our suggestion is.
Yeah, but in terms of next steps, yes, I can go comment on that issue that we have based on what we discussed today, and also write up a doc on how we want to do this in terms of the actual design, and then the steps that we will do, and then maybe we can use these to discuss this further and make a decision if you want to do it. Sounds good. Okay, so I think that is all the discussion items we had. Anything else that anyone wants to discuss that's not on the agenda?
I think Xander, you said you'll be talking to ESO folks at KubeCon.
Yeah, they reached out about meeting at KubeCon. I'll
Okay.
follow up with them and we'll try to, yeah, Mo, if you maybe wanna join me and chat with them, we can grab some time with them.
I'll
Sounds good.
also be there if you.
Oh yeah, that's right. You're gonna be there too. So yeah, we could all meet with them.
Okay.
I'm excited to see people.
I think it will be good to have some kind of, I mean, regardless of like what users want to use, I think it would just be good if the two projects have some way to at least to make migration easier, you know?
I also just think like from a community perspective, like it sends a good signal to the community if like these competing projects actually had a healthy relationship and not a hostile relationship. Like, yeah, I just think it's open source as it should be done.
Good. Okay, let's look at test grid. Oh wow, it's never been this green. Okay.
What are you talking about, Anish? It's supposed to be green like this.
We never say that, Anish.
Yeah, we need to
It's
find some
never
way.
this green. Even Kubernetes KK is never this green. It's no. What's this?
Well, I mean, yeah, but KK has a bunch of people adding a bunch of flake tests that turn the whole thing red all the time.
It's true.
Looking good.
Oh, also, just randomly, Xander, congrats on the release, sir. Thank you. We are.
Thank you. Oh yeah. It's weird, like, so the release was like incredibly smooth. Almost nothing went wrong, but it was still incredibly stressful. The very, very big weight, even though it was going well. When it finally released, it was like biggest exhale.
Hey, at least you guys didn't have to do Git surgery this time. Like I was watching that thread when they were like, all right, hey, everybody look at these Git shards. Are you sure you want me to force push to this branch? Are you really, really sure?
Yeah. We came pretty close at one point to having to do some Git surgery, but avoided it narrowly.
Yeah.
Oh, I think there's a question on chat. Do we have time to go over the encryption key indirection flow or open questions? Yeah, I think from the discussion last time, we had discussion around like how we want to do it, like with service accounts and multiple audiences. If we also have to use the audience as the cache key, and then I think the final outcome was maybe we should start building the POC so then we can see if we are missing out any of the scenarios. Like I think once we have the POC, it's easier to build on top of that. And then also add that to the design doc. So that is what it came down to last time to answer the question on the chat. Because I think we need to just make a decision whether the provider gives the driver the cache key or the driver comes up with it. But so far, it does look like the provider would need to do it just because the service account could have different audience, but the driver also has that information. So I think we just need to see which one we need to use.
Yeah, and I haven't gotten very far in poking around. Just all I've been doing is mostly just kind of looking at the code base, but it's not very large. I just haven't looked at it in so long. And I'm like, what does this do exactly?
Yeah, I'll just add your name to the agenda for the demo next week more. So
well, yeah, it's great. I won't be here because it's KubeCon. So like,
Oh no, but next week is KubeCon. We have community meeting the following week.
yeah, no, I'm on PTO that week. So like, you can't rope me in.
If you want to record it, that's fine too.
Yeah,
Also, you have history on working on your PTO, so maybe.
No, this time I'm gonna be good. This time the laptop will be off. Yeah, I have a history of being unemployed and then still actually working on careers.
Thanks for doing that.
Yeah. I think, Rita, to answer your question, we have a issue for disconnected scenarios, but as we do the milestone planning, or maybe before, I'll open another issue and then add this design doc to it and then document what we're trying to do. Anything else that we want to discuss?
Random question. Today, does the driver service account have any like authorization against the provider?
No.
Okay. I was just thinking about like, I was thinking if the driver could have the capability of like making calls to the provider, like if that would help us in any way, like if we could ask the provider certain questions, maybe that could help us build like a cache. I'm just really thinking out loud right now. I'm not really sure if that makes sense, but maybe, I don't know. Yeah, I think I'll be able to answer that question myself better if I actually try to build something. Oh, I guess a random question for like you guys. I assume I can run all this stuff pretty easily locally, right? I haven't actually tried to actually run anything.
Yeah, you can run it on a kind cluster.
Kind is like one of the greatest inventions in Kubernetes history. Is just kind.
Yeah,
it's not even a real thing. It's just it's like a toy cluster.
Yeah,
I used to use Minikube.
Oh man.
And then K3s, and then I stumbled upon Gatekeeper, and those guys were using Kind. Like back when I was not here, I was like, oh, Kind is good.
Yeah, but I was also saying, I think in terms of debugging locally and all of that, like Nilek had added few dev container stuff, I think, for debugging, but I just realized Mo doesn't use VS codes.
No, actually, I'm curious more. So if you figured out attaching debugger, then I'm very much interested. I will buy Golang for that.
Oh yeah, no. What do you like? Attaching debugger locally or remotely?
Remotely.
Okay, I haven't tried remotely, but locally it works perfect.
Oh. I mean, it
Um,
works in VS Code. So
Yeah, but no, I could try doing a remote debugger. I think it works.
in theory it works, and I tried, but then like I was like caught into other stuff for 2 years now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
But yeah, I mean, we have an E2E provider if you want to run that. If not, if you want to deploy the Azure provider too, you would just need to use like service principals for auth. But yeah, if you have any questions, I can help out.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good KubeCon.
Yep. Bye bye. Enjoy.
Bye. Take care.